Shabbat Shalom. We will start on page 65. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan avina lavchin ben yom uven laila. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shasani b'tzalmo. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shasani Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shasani ben chorin. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam pokeach ivrim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam malbish arumim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam matir asurim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam tzokef kifufim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam roka aretz al hamayim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shasali kol tzorki. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamechin metzadei gaver. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam ozer Yisrael bigvura. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam oter Yisrael betifara. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hanotan la'ayev koach. Chayom chesed urachamim v'necha v'nekol ro'enu v'tigmalenu chasidim tovim Baruch atah Adonai gomel chasidim tovim le'amo Yisrael. Rabbon kol Elohim al tzadikenu. Ashreinu matov halkeinu manayim goralenu mayafa Yerushatenu. Ashreinu sha'anachnu maskimim u'marivim erev v'boker from b'bayim b'chol yom. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai echad. Kadesh Simcha Makdishei Shemecha Kadesh Simcha Olamecha V'Shraka Tarim B'Tagbia Karnenu Baruch Atah Adonai Mekadesh Simcha Barabim Ki Atahu Elohim. Yehi Ritzom Lefanech Adonai Eloheinu v'Elahei Avotenu Shetiten Halkeinu B'Tor Techav Midamidal Shal Aharon Chakohen Ochev Shalom B'Lev Shalom Ochev Et Habriot Ukarvan LeTorah. We're good?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Kiddush D'Rabbanan, page 71. Yit Gadal.
No, we're not. Sorry.
I'm sorry.
We're not.
Okay, Rabbi was wrong. We're going to continue on page 72. Mismor Shir LaYom HaShabbat. Magadlu Masechaya Meoram Kumashavotechaya Seva the Shenim Ranadim Liu Liagik Yasharana Turi Love Lahatabo. Continue on page 81. Mizmor Shir Chanukah Bait Ledavi. Page 82. Yitgadal v'yikadash shemei Rabbah. Yalmad divrach yivutev le'amlich mafuteh. V'chayechon u'vyamechon u'chayeh dekol beit Yisrael b'agala u'bizman kariv v'yimru amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach le'ol me'olmaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudusha b'richu le'ela mincho birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata damiram b'yalma v'yimru amen. Yehei shlama Rabbah min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'yalkol Yisrael v'yimru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'yalkol Yisrael v'yimru amen. Baruch she'amar v'yaya olam, Baruch Hu, Baruch Haseh v'Bereshit, Baruch Shemo, Baruch Omer v'Yoseh, Baruch Hu, Baruch Gozer Unkayim, Baruch Shemo, Baruch Merachem al Haaretz, Baruch Hu, Baruch Merachem al Habriot, Baruch Shemo, Baruch Mersalem Zakar Tov Lireya, Baruch Hu, Baruch al Advekayam LaNetzach, Baruch Shemo, Baruch Poder Yehu Matzil, Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemo. Yachid Hail Aminach Beshbach Umpe Ade Adshamo Hagadol Baruch Ataranach Makulal Matish Bacho. Let's jump to page 92. Yeah, let's move it. Hodul Adonai ki tov ki le'olam kasto hodul ha Elohim ki le'olam kasto hodul Adonai Adonim ki le'olam kasto le'osei niflo kidolot levado ki le'olam kasto le'osei hashamayim mitfuna ki le'olam kasto ha'aretz al hamayim ki le'olam kasto le'oseorim gedolim ki le'olam kasto let Hashem mislamim shelet bayom ki le'olam kasto let Areach l'monshli l'benshelo palayla ki le'olam kasto l'mechim b'Yitzrayim b'forehem ki le'olam kasto le'yotzei Yisrael mitocham ki le'olam kasto le'yad hasaka u'vizran etuyah ki le'olam kasto le'gazer yansuf l'zarim ki le'olam kasto Yisrael b'toko ki le'olam kasto paro v'chalav yansuf ki le'olam kasto le'molech amo b'midbar ki le'olam kasto le'mechim melechim gedolim ki le'olam kasto le'org melechim adirim ki le'olam kasto le'sichon melech ha'emori ki le'olam kasto u'lov melech ha'bashan ki le'olam kasto le'natan artzam le'nachala ki le'olam kasto nachala le'Yisrael le'avdo ki le'olam kasto she'b'sifleinu zakar lanu ki le'olam kasto le'yifrikenu mitzareinu ki le'olam kasto noten lechem l'chol basar ki le'olam kasto hodu le'el hashamayim ki le'olam kasto Continue on page 96 with Ashrei. Ashrei Yoshvei Beit HaKadol HaSelah. Yadecha v'schachai ratzon tzadik Adonai. Adonai daber pi v'verek kovas Hashem kochol elam bed v'nachtu v'rechem et hevet olam. Hallelujah. Shemirakim Mitomana, Yudid Reder, Rishim Yavitim, Locharana Lacham Chaisil Dovador. Hallelujah. Let's jump to page 100. Hallelujah, 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 big God show, hallelujah, big Yahozo, hallelujah, big Vurotav, hallelujah, Kira. Hallelujah, betoch umachol. Hallelujah, beneni behugah. Hallelujah, 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 betzitz leishama. Hallelujah, betzitz aletrua. Godishama til hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Amen. The Amen. 101, please rise. Tahu Adonai Elohim Asher b'chata b'avracham v'yotzitor meor kastim samtashimo avracham umatzat et levo neman lefanecha. B'chata lifnehem v'havu patoch hayam b'yabasha v'hem hishlach tavim saluk kemo even b'mayim azim. Yisrael Tiyad HaGadolah Asher Adonai B'Yitzrayim V'hu Am Adonai B'Aminu B'Adonai Moshe Avdo. Oziv Zimrat Adonai Yishma. Adonai Yimloch Le'olam Adonai Yimloch Le'olam Va'ed Ki Adonai Yimloch Mashav Goyim Lushim Mefranzum Zishpot Et Char Esav V'Haytad Adonai Humlucha V'Haya Adonai Omelech HaKaretz V'Yom Hahu Adonai Echad U'Shmo Echad. Shmad Kochai Tivarech Et Shimcha Haonai Eloheinu Veruach Kol Basar Tifaher Utromein Zichracha Makenu Tami Min HaOlam Viad HaOlam Ata Machi nafshi et Adonai v'kol kravai et shen kodsho ha'el b'tatzumo tuzecha hagadol kevod shemecha Gibor LaNetzach Vehanora Belorotecha HaMelech HaYoshev HaKisei Rambanisa
Shelo echad milvan amad aleinu lechalotenu ela Hashem chol dor vador omdim aleinu hay lechalotenu v'hi she'amda lavotenu shelo echad bilvad amad aleinu lechalotenu ela Hashem chol dor vador omdim aleinu lechalotenu. So this is the promise. This is the promise that not only once, the Haggadah says, will they arise against us to destroy us, rather, no, in every generation, Ve'akadosh Baruch Hu yatzilenu biyadam, and God will save us from their hands. And this is, I think about this a lot every year at the Seder. It's sort of an extraordinary and unsettling promise. That we are not promised lightness, we are also promised darkness. And, when we bring, Pesach's all about telling our kids this story. We bring our kids into the world. We are promising them not only a beautiful life, but also a painful life and a difficult life. And it reminded me of this poem called Two Promises by Reginald Gibbons. The spring will come back along the route winter took, touching things inadvertently and changing them. The way someone I did not know I loved unthinkingly laid a hand on my arm while speaking to one another. And autumn comes down along the river and passes through town on its way south, heads for places it will never reach, leaves everything perfectly placed, bare and clean, the line of poplars at the stream bed, our lives.
Shochenad marom v'kadosh shemo. Yisharim nava tehila, b'fi yisharim tithalal, u'divrei tzadikim titbarach, u'l'shon chasidim titromam, u'v'keret kedoshim titgadash. Shekin chovat hayitzurim lefanecha, Adonai Eloheinu v'leher v'teinu, lahodot lehalel l'shabeach, levayer l'romen l'hader, levarek l'chales al kol divrei shiro, b'tishbachot, David ben Yishai, Alecha mishichecha, yishtabach shemcha la'am, Shemayim v'aretz ki l'chanai Cheers, Rachai, Brachot v'hoda'ot me'atav yad olam, Baruch ata Adonai el melech gadol, v'tishbachot, el hoda'ot Adon ha'nifla'ot, ha'bocher b'shirei zimra melech el chei ha'olamim. Yitkedah shmei rabbi, Yivrach Yitev Yomlin Pakutei b'chaychon, Uvyom echon v'chayid chol beit Yisrael, Bagalad Zman Kariv Yemru. Amen. Vayesh tabak v'yitpa'ar v'yitroma v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitalav v'yitalav shmei d'kudah shabrihu. Le'elam min kol birchata v'shirata, tuj b'chata v'nechamata, damiran b'yama v'yemru. Amen. Baruchu et Adonai ha'mevorach. Baruch Adonai ha'mevorach le'olam va'ed. Hai dai 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 hai dai 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 hai dai 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 hai dai 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 hai dai dai hai dai 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 hai ma dai 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 hai 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 dai 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 ma dai 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 hai dai 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 הכל יודוך וכל ישבחוך. מאיר לעולם וכולו. מאיר לארץ ולדברים לך ברחמים ובטובו מחדש בכל יום תמיד מעשה בראשית. כי ערכך אדוני ולא תעשה ואין זולתך מלכנו לחיי העולם הבא. אפס בלתך גואלנו לימות המשיח ואין דומה לך מושיענו לתחיית המתים. אל אדון על כל המעשים ברוך ומבורך בפי כל נשמה גודלו וטובו מלא עולם דעת ותבונה סובבים אותו המתגאה על חיות הקודש ונדר בכבוד על המרכבה זכות ומישור לפני כיסו חסד ורחם לפני כבודו טובים מאוד שברא אלוהינו יצרם בדעת בבינה ובהשכל כוח וגבורה נתן בהם להיות בקרב תבל על מלאים זיוום פיקים נוגה נעזיבה בכל עולם שמחים בצאתם וששים בבואם עושים ביים הרצון קונם ביער וכבוד נותנים לשמות צלה ורינה לזכר מלכותו קרא לשמש ויזרח אור רעה והתקין צורת עינת השבח נותנים לו כל צבא מרום תפארת וגדולה סרפים ואופנים וחיות קודש די די דמי די 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 דמי די די דמי די שבת מכל המעשים ביום השביעי משבח ואומר לפיכך יפארו יברכו באל כל צורה ועל מרשת כולם אהובים, כולם ברורים, כולם גיבורים וכולם עושים באימה וביראה רצון קונם וכולם פותחים את פיהם בקדושה וטהרה בשירה ובזמרה מברכים שבחים ופארים ומריצים ומקדישים וממליכים את שם האל המלך הגדול וכולם מקבלים עליהם עול מלכות שמיים זה מזה ונותנים רשות זה לזה להקדיש יותרם בנחת רוח בשפה ברורה ונעימה קדושה כולם כאחד עונים ואומרים ביראה קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות בכל הארץ כבודו אופנים וחיות הקודש בראש גדול מנסים למצרפים לעומתם משבחים ואומרים ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו ליל ברוך נמות ייתנו למלך אל חי וקיים זמירות יאמרו ותשבח עוד ישמיעו כי הוא לבדו פועל גבורות עושה חדש זורע צדקות, מצמיח ישועות, בורא רפואות, נורא תהילות, אדון הנפלאות, המחדש בטובו, בכל תמיד, מעשה בראשית, כאמור לעושה, הורים גדולים, כי לעולם חסדו, אור חדש, על ציון תאיר, 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 ונזכה כולנו מהרה לאורו, ונזכה כולנו מהרה לאורו. ברוך אתה אדוני יוצר המאורות, אבל רבבתנו שם לגדול אבינו. והאר עינינו בתורתך, ודבק לבנו במצוותיך, ויחד לבבינו לאהבה וליראה את שמך, ולא נבוש לעולם ועד, ולא נבוש לעולם ועד, כי בשם קודשך הגדול והנורא בעתנו, נגילה ונשמחה, נגילה ונשמחה בישועתך. והביאנו לשלום מארבע כנפות הארץ, ותוליכנו כמומים לארצנו, כי על פועל ישועות אתה, ובנו בחרת מכל עם ולשון, וקרבתנו לשמך הגדול סלע באמת, להודות לך ולייחדך באהבה. ברוך אתה אדוני הבוחר בעמו ישראל באהבה. שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אדוני אלוהיכם אמת ויציב ונכון וקיים וישר ונאמן ורחום וחביב. טוב ויפה הדבר הזה עלינו לעולם ועד, אמת אלוהי עולם מלכנו. ודור ודור הוא קיים ושמו קיים וכיסו נכון ומלכותו ואמונתו לעד קיימת. דברי וחיים חיים על אבותינו ועלינו, על בנינו ועל דורותינו.
Emet shatahu Adonai Eloheinu v'Elokei Avotenu Malkeinu melech Avotenu Goelenu Goel Avotenu Yotzreinu to Yeshuatenu Podenu Umatilenu Me'olam Shemecha Ein Elohim Zulatecha Ezra Davotenu Atahu Me'olam Again Mershuvah. Ram v'nisa gadol v'nora mashpil geim umagbi ashefalim moti asirim ufode hanavim v'yozer dalim aydai v'yoner le'amo v'yechavam hela tihilot le'el baruch umbora tirahu umborach Moshe u'Miriam uvnei Yisrael L'cha anu shir rabba simcha rabba v'amru hulam Micha mocha ba'elim Adonai Micha mocha nedar b'kodesh Nora tehilot Osef ele Nora tehilot Osef ele Ayin ashira Hadasha Shebechu ge'ulim Leshimcha Al Sfat hayam Yachatulam Hodu V'yimlichu V'yamru Aydai Adonai Yimloch Le'olam va'ed Ayadai Yadai Yadai Ayay Yadai Ayadai Yadai Ayadai Yadai Ayadai Hay yadai yadai hay yadai 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 hay yadai 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 hay yadai Sur Yisrael Kuma be'ezrat Yisrael Uvdekenu mecha Yehuda v'Yisrael Go aleinu Adonai tzvot shemo Kedosh Yisrael Baruch atah Adonai Gal Yisrael.
On page 115, please remember to include the sections for Shabbat Rosh Chodesh.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu Elohei Avraham Elohei Yitzchak v'Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel v'Elohei Leah Ha'el Hagadol Hagibur v'Hanora El Elyon Gomel Chasadim Tovim v'Konei Hakol Zocher Chasdei Avot Umevi Goel Evnei V'neihem Leman Shemo B'Yava Melech Ozer Foker Moshia U'Magen Baruch Atah Adonai Magen Avraham U'Fokei Tzara Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai Mechayim Eitim Atah Rav L'Hoshia Mashiva Ruach U'Morid Agash Mechakel Chaim Bechesed Mechayim Meitim Berachamim Rabim Somech Noflim Berofeh Cholim Umatir Asurim Umekayem Emunato משני עפר, מי כמוך בגבורות ומדם מלך, מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה לחיות מתים ברוך, אתה אדוני מחיי המתים. נקדש את שמך בעולם כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום, ככתוב על יד נביאיך וקרא זה אל זה ויאמר. קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות מלוכו הארץ כבודו, אז בקול רעש גדול אדיר וחזק משמיעים קול, מתנשאים למצרפים נעמתם ברוך יאמרו. ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו, ממקומך מלכנו תופיע ותמלוך עלינו, כי מחכים אנחנו לה. Ay, 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 matai temlok betzion bekarov b'yameinu le'olam cha'et tishkon titgadah v'titgadah בתוך ירושלים עירך דור ודור נצח נצחים היי 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 ואיננו קרן מלכותך שירי עוזך על ידי דוד משיח צדקך היי 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 ימלוך אדוני דור ודור, הללויה. איי, 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 דור ודור נגיד גודלך, ונצח נצחים קדושתך נטיש, ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד, כי המלך גדול וקדוש אתה, ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש. Continue on page 133. Please remain standing if you're able. Baruch Adonai Mechalam, Asher Kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu likro et hallel. Hallelujah, 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 Avdei Adonai. Hallelujah, 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 et Shem Adonai. Yehi Shem Adonai mevorach me'ata v'yad olam mimizrach shemesh ad mevo mehula Shem Adonai Ramal Kol Goyim Adonai Mikimi me'afar da me'ashpot yarim evion lo shivim nidivim en nidivei amo moshivi akeret habayit Em habanim smecha, hallelujah. B'tzeit Yisrael, mi Mitzrayim, Beit Yaakov me'amoed. B'tzeit Yisrael, mi Mitzrayim, Beit Yaakov me'amoed. Hayta Yehuda lekadsho, Yisrael mamshelotav hayam ravayanos hayarden yisov leachor harim rakeduchenim v'or kivnetzon malecha hayam kitanu hayarden tisov leachor harim tirkadu che'elim yivaot kivnetzon milefnei adon chuli aretz milefnei Elohai Yaakov ha'hofchi hatzur agam ma'ir chalamim lemayno ma'ir Adonai zecharanu yivarech et Beit Yisrael Yivarech et Beit Aharon Yivarech Yirei Adonai Hikatanim imagidolim Yosef Adonai alechem Lechem v'yavnechem Ruchim atem l'Adonai Ose shamayim ve'aretz Shamayim Adonai Haaretz Livnei Adam Lo ametim Hallelujah Lo kol yodei duma V'anachnu nevarech ya Me'ata v'yad olam Me'ata v'yad olam Hallelujah Ma'ashiv l'Adonai Kol tagmulo hi alai Kos Yeshuot esa Uv'shem Adonai ekra Nedarai l'Adonai Kim ben amatecha, ani avdecha, namatecha, pitachta lemoserai, lecha ezbat, zevach toda, uv'shem Adonai, ekra nedarai l'Adonai, Yashalem, negdana lecholam, ay, Ezro, Beit Adonai, betochechi Yerushalayim, betochechi Yerushalayim, hallelujah, hallelujah, et Adonai, kol goyim, shabchuhu, shabchuhu, kol haumim, ki gavar aleinu, aleinu chasto, ve'emet Adonai, le'olam hallelujah, hodu l'Adonai, ki tov, ki le'olam, ki le'olam chasto, yomana, yomana, yomana Yisrael, ki le'olam chasto, yomruna, yomruna, yomruna Beit Aharon, ki le'olam chasto, yomruna, 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 yirei Adonai, ki le'olam chasto, min ha'metzar karatiya, ani b'merchavya, Adonai li lo ira. Zimradia, Vayahi Lishua, Ozi, Zimradia, Vayahi Lishua, Ozi, Zimradia, Vayahi Lishua, Ozi, Zimradia, Vayahi Lishua, Aida. Pitruli Share Tzedek Avova Odeya Pitruli Share Tzedek Avova צדיקים יבואו, זה אשר לאדוני, צדיקים יבואו, עודך כי עניתני באתי לישועה, עודך כי עניתני באתי לישועה, אבן מצאו הבונים הייתה לראש פינה, אבן מצאו הבונים הייתה לראש פינה, מאת אדוני הייתה זאת, היא נפלאת בעינינו, מאת אדוני הייתה זאת, היא נפלאת בעינינו. זה היום עשה אדוני, נגילה ונשמחה בו. זה היום עשה אדוני, נגילה ונשמחה בו. אנא אדוני הושיע נא, אדוני הושיע נא, אנא אדוני הצליחה נא, אנא אדוני הצליחה נא. ברוך הבא בשם אדוני, ברכנוכם מדבר. ברוך הבא בשם אדוני. אלי אתה ויודעך, אלוהי ארוממך. אלי אתה ויודעך, אלוהי ארוממך. הודו לאדוני כי טוב, כי לעולם חסדו. הודו לאדוני כי טוב, כי לעולם חסדו. יעללוך אדוני אלוהינו לכל מעשיך וחסידיך. כי לך טוב להודות, לשמך נאה לזמר, כי מעולם עד עולם אתה אל. ברוך אתה אדוני, מלך מהולל ותשבחו. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, בעלמא דברה חירותי, וימליך מלכותי. בחייכון וביום איכון, וברכי דכל בית ישראל. בגלה בזמן קריב ויאמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם ומיה. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתהלל ויתהלל, שמי בקדושה בריחו. לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמת, דעמי רמי אלמה ויאמרו תקבל צלותנו ועלותנו לכל ישראל, קדם אבוהם דבשמיא ויאמרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל. אדוני 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 ויאמרו אמן אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו. ידע 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 ואמרו אמן.
The Torah Service is on page 139.
En kamacha Elohim Adonai, en kamasecha malchutecha malchut kol amin umemshaltecha bechol dor vador Adonai melech Adonai malach Adonai imloch le'olam va'ed Adonai oz le'amo yiteh
הגבורה והתפארת והנצח והכל כי כל בשמיים ובארץ כי כל בשמיים ובארץ לך אדוני הממלכה והמנעשה לכל ראש רוממו אדוני אלוהינו וישתחוו Yes. The parasha is Parashat Tazria, which describes the parsha we're reading describes the process by which the Kohanim would examine different kinds of skin infections to establish their purity or impurity. We will have much more to say as the parsha continues. We have 3 Torahs because of when Rosh Chodesh falls on Shabbat HaChodesh. We have 2 special readings, which I'll describe a little bit more as we get to them. Yeah, it's a triple header. It's pretty rare, but it happens. And
We are on page 655, verse 29, the very bottom of the page. Amen. Cohen Krav Yamod Menachem ben Shlomo HaKohen Baruch Shenatan Torah Lemoshe B'Kedushato
Adonai Adonai Chaim Chochem
Baruch Adonai Hamvorah.
Baruch Adonai Barach Leolam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Leolam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Ha'amim V'natan Lanu Et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen. V'isha Isha Ki Yevo Naga Barosha V'Zakahan V'Ra Kohen Edanega V'nei Mareu Amok Min HaOr Uvo Se'arta Ovdak V'Timeota Kohen Etakut Zarat HaRosh HaZakan Hu V'chi Yir'eh HaKohen Ednega Netek V'nei Mareu Amok Min HaOr V'Se'ar Shachor Ein Bo V'Yizgir HaKohen Ednega Netek Shivat Yamim V'Ra Kohen Edanega V'Yom HaShevi'i V'hi Ne'lo Fasa Netek V'lo Yebo Se'ar Tahov Umar Hanetek Ein Amok Min HaOr ויקלח ואת הנתק לא יגלח, ויזכיר הכהן את הנתק 7 ימים שני. וראה הכהן את הנתק ביום השביעי, והנה לא פסה הנתק באור, ומראהו איננו עמוק מן האור, וטיהר אותו הכהן, וכיבס בגדיו וטהר.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torat emet v'chayei olam nata betochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Shkoyach.
Sarah Rivka bat Shlomo, Halevi b'Chava, Abad Levi.
656, verse 35.
Baruch et Adonai hamavarach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Leolam Vaed.
Baruch Adonai havarach leolam vaed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. V'im paso yifseh hanetק באור אחרי טהרתו, וראו הכהן והנה פסה הנתק באור, לא יבקר הכהן לשיער הצהוב טמא הוא, ואם בעיניו עמוד הנתק ושיער השחור צמח בו, נרפא הנתק טהור הוא, ותיארו הכהן, ואישו אישה כי יהיה באור בשרם בהרות לבנות, וראה הכהן והנה באור בשרם בהרות כהות לבנות, בוהקו פרח באור טהור הוא.
Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torat emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Shkoyach.
Eliyahu ben Aharon, Shlishi. We're on page 657, verse 40.
Baruch et Adonai Hamvorach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Leolam Vaed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Leolam Vaed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. V'hish ki mared rosho kerachu ta'orhu, v'im mipat panav yimared rosho gibechu ta'orhu, v'chi yisheh b'karachto v'gabachto בקרחת או בגבחת, נגע לבן אדמדם, צרת פורחת היא בקרחתו או בגבחתו.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torat emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Shkoyach, Shabbat Shalom.
Mordechai David ben Yaakov Leliah HaRavi'it.
We're on 657, verse 43.
Baruch et Adonai Hamvorach. Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Leolam Vaed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. וראה אותו הכהן, והנה שאת הנגע לבנה אדמדמת, בקרחתו וגבחתו, כמראה צרעת אור בשר, איש צרוע הוא, טמא הוא, טמא יטמאנו, הכהן בראשו נגעו, והצרוע אשר בו הנגע בגדיו יהיו פרומים, בראשו יהיה פרוע, ועל שפם יטה, וטמא טמא יקרא. כל ימי אשר הנגע בו יטמא טמא הוא, בדד ישב מחוץ למחנה מושבו.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
Shabbat shalom.
Page 658, verse 47. Number 5. Ya'amod. Menachem Mendel ben Hendel Aliyah HaChamishit. Before we continue with the fifth Aliyah, we will include a Mishaberach for the Cholim. As always, I will read the names on the list, and then I will pause, and anyone is invited to stand to add extra names of those for whom we are praying this morning. Mishaberach Abotenu Avram Yitzchak v'Yaakov Sarah Rivka Rachel v'Leah Yivarech v'Rapeh et Tzipora bat Yita v'et Rita Vasquez v'et Rachel bat Rivka v'et Avram ben An v'et Leah Nechama bat Rachel v'et Daniel ben Naomi v'et Liba bat Krendel v'et Perel Basha bat Chia v'et Dov Yosef ben Yeta v'et David ben Chava v'et Chava bat Perel v'et Josephine Arkwright v'et David ben Yisrael Vet Roberta Laban, Vet Paula Silverman, Vet Adina Bat Liorit, Vet Ann Perlman, Vet Eitan Ben Esther, Vet Esther Bat Bela, Vet Mordechai Yosef Ben Gita Yaakova, Vet Chana Yudit Bat Esther, Vet Tina Casper, Vet Ida Sperano, Vet Phyllis Murphy, Vet Samuel Chafetz, Vet Iris Kempf, Vet Brian Stein, Vet David Michael Ben Gila Eliza, Vet Chaim Esser Ben Yosef, Vet Yisrael David Ben Miriam, Ben Mira, Vet Mordechai Laser, Ben Rachel Breuner, Vet Reuven Ben Tzvi, Vet Patrick Champ, Vet Esther Bat Elka, Vet Emily Greenhouse, Vet Frumut Bat Tzvi, Vet Ruth Miriam Bat Elka Basha, Vet Pecha Bat Yiska, Vet And anyone joining us online? HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yimalei Rachamim Aleim Lachazikam L'Rapotam Vayishlach Lehem Nera Refuah Shlema Min HaShamayim Refuat HaNefesh Refuat HaGuf B'Tov Shar Chol Yisrael Shabbat Himili Zok Refuah Krova Lavo Shabbat Zman Kariv V'no Mahar Amen.
Hi, join me. On page 14, 5 lines down, the second word in. El na refanala beharot la noam zivach az titchazek v'titrapeh v'haita
continues on page 658, verse 47.
Baruch Hu es Adonai Hamborach. Baruch Adonai Hamborach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'nasan lanu es Torah. So Baruch atah Adonai nosein ha'Torah.
Amen.
Amen. V'habeged yevo negat sarat beveged semer o beveged pishtim o vishti o ve'erev la pishtim ve'la tzamer o ve'or o bechol melechet or v'haya hanega yerak rak o adam dam babeged over over shiti over erev over chol kelei or negat saraat hu vehor'a et hakohen v'ra'a hakohen et hanaga v'hiskir et hanega shivat yamim.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher nasan lanu Torah emes v'chayei olam nata b'sochenu. Baruch atah Adonai nosein ha'Torah.
Telling about Rivka Laliyah HaShishit, verse 51, page 658.
Baruch Hu et Adonai Hamborach. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu. I skipped one. Baruch Adonai Hamborach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai notein ha'Torah.
Amen. V'ra'a et hanega bayom hashvi'i ki fasa hanega babeged ovashiti ova erev ova or lechol asher ye'aseh ha'or limlacha tzara'at mam'eret hanega tamehu v'saraf et habeged o et hasheti o et ha'erev batzemer o v'pishtim o et kol keli ha'or asher yavo hanaga ki tzara'at mam'eret hi ba'esh tisaref im yera'eh hakohen v'hinei lo fasah nega babeged ovasheti ova erev o bechol keli or v'tziva hakohen v'chibesu et asher bo hanaga v'hiskiro shivat yamim shenit v'ra'a hakohen acharei ukabes et hanega v'hinei lo hafach hanega et eno v'hanega lo fasa tamehu ba'esh tisrefenu pechetati v'karachto o v'gabachto ve'im ra'a hakohen v'hinei kehanega acharei ukabes oto v'kara oto min habeged o min haor o min hasheti o min ha'erev ve'im tera'eh od habeged ובשתי ובערב, וכל כלי אור, פורחת היא באש תשרפנו, את אשר בו הנגע והבגד, או השתי או הערב, או כל כלי האור, אשר תכבס בשר מהם הנגע, וכובס שנית וטהר, זאת תורת נגע צרת, בגד הצמר או הפשתים, או השתי או הערב, או כל כלי אור, לטהרו או לטמאו.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת, וחיי עולם נטע בפנינו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
Shabbat shalom, Chodesh Tov.
Please rise.
יעמדו המגביה והגוללת לספר ראשון. זאת התורה אשר שם משה לפני בני ישראל על פי אדוני ביד משה. תורה, 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 ציווה לנו משה. תורה, 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 ציווה לנו משה. תורה, 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 ציווה לנו משה. תורה, 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 ציווה לנו משה. מורשה קהילת יעקב, מורשה קהילת יעקב, מורשה קהילת יעקב, תורה ציווה לנו משה. You may be seated. The second Torah we read from is actually not the maftir. When it is Shabbat Rosh Chodesh as it is today, the maftir reading is from Pinchas, like all of the maftir readings for the special occasions are. It begins on page 930, verse 9. Today it's actually not the maftir, it is the seventh aliyah, which is why we didn't say Chatzi Kaddish between the two Sifrei Torah, as we usually do, to divide the main Torah reading from the maftir reading, which means the reading that closes the Torah. The maftir is the one who closes the reading. The maftir is actually the special reading for Shabbat HaChodesh, which is not Shabbat Rosh Chodesh. It is the Shabbat before Pesach. The Shabbat before Nisan. Usually, unless it is the first day of Nisan, as it is today. Which is why you have three Torahs. The reading again is on page 930, verse 9. Seventh Aliyah. Ha'amod. On Amal Kabat Mendel. La'aliyah ha'shvi'it. Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai noten ha'torah.
Amen.
Amen. וביום השבת שני כבשים בני שנה תמימים ושני עשרונים סולת מנחה בלולב השמן ונזכר עולת שבת בשבתו על עולת התמיד ונזכר ובראשי חודשכם תקריבו עלה לאדוני תרים בני בקר שניים לאיל אחד כבשים בני שנה 7 תמימים ו13 עשרונים סולת מנחה בלולב השמן לפר האחד ו2 עשרונים סולת מנחה בלולב השמן לעיל האחד ויסרון יסרון סולת מנחה בלולב השמן לכבש האחד עולה ריח ניחוח אישה לאדוני ונזכיהם חצי ההין יהיה לפר ושלישית ההין לעיל ורביעית ההין לכבש יין זאת עולת חודש בחודשו בחודשי השנה וזעיר עזים אחד לחטאת לאדוני על עולת התמיד יעשה ונזכור.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah temet v'chayei olam nota b'tochenu Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Shabbat shalom, Chodesh tov.
Ya Amdu Hamagbiya V'Hagolel. Oh, what's yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Sefer Sheni.
Well, they can be called. Yeah.
What?
What's that?
Sefer Sheni.
What's Sefer Sheni?
יתגדל ויתקדש ורבה ועמד יברא קירותי וימליך מלכותי וחייך יומך וחייך בית ישראל בגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן יהי שומרה לברך יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמת קודשו לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה קודש ברכתה ונתנתה תמירה נעמה ואמרו אמן.
יעמדו המגיע והגולל לספר שני.
וזאת התורה אשר שם משה לפני בני ישראל על פי נולד ביד משה.
מציון תצא תורה ודבר השם ירושלים כי מציון תצא תורה ודבר השם ירושלים The maftir is from Parashat Bo. It is on page 380, chapter 12. It recounts the laws and story of Pesach, both of which are sort of bearing down on us. I think a couple of weeks ago, when we had the first of the 4 parshiot leading up to Pesach, Jack said it's like the warning shot over the bow. And actually, I am watching this great pirate show on HBO called Our Flag Means Death, put together by the incredible Taika Waititi, who was born Taika Cohen, who is a Jewish Maori New Zealand actor and director of great, great talents. So I never really thought about what it means to shoot over the bow. It means when the British are over there, the first one goes over the ship, and the next one goes into the ship. Right? So in this example, Pesach is like the British, and they're coming. And the mafia is like, if you're not starting to prepare right now, the next one's going in the ship. You're going under. So that's what this is about. That's why we have the third Torah, and it's on page 380, and we're going to read it now. And I'm the maftir, so I need one other Gabbai.
I'm disappointed. I thought you were going to say he was a Jewish pirate.
Yeah. There's a whole book about that.
Harav.
Binyamin Yonatan.
Benjamin Yonatan.
Ben Akiva Yitzchak.
Ben Akiva Yitzchak.
Shoshana.
Shoshana Maftir Chazak. Page 380.
Chapter 12.
Oh, this was my son's bar mitzvah.
Memories.
The blue guy.
Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai Baruch Leolam Vahed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Ha'amim V'natan Lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen. Vayomer Adonai el Moshe ve'el Aharon be'eretz Mitzrayim lemor hachodesh hazeh lachem rosh chodashim rishon hu lachem lechodshei hashana daberu el koladat Israel lemor be'asor lachodesh hazeh v'yikchu lahem ish sel lebeit avot sel labayit ve'im yim'at habayit miyot miseh ve'lakachu ushcheno הקרוב אל ביתו במכסת נפשות איש לפי אוכלו תחוסו על תמים זכר בן שנה יהיה לכם מן הכבשים ומן העזים תיקחו והיה לכם למשמרת עד 14 יום לחודש הזה ושחטו אותו כל קהל עדת ישראל בין הארבעים ולקחו מן הדם ונתנו על שתי המזוזות ועל המשקוף על הבתים אשר יאכלו אותו בהם ואכלו את הבשר בלילה הזה צבי אש ומצות על מרורים יאכלוהו אל תאכלו ממנו נא ובשל מבושל במים כי אם צבי אש ראשו על קרעיו ועל קרבו ולא תותירו ממנו עד בוקר והנותר ממנו עד בוקר באש תשרפו וככה תאכלו אותו מותניכם חגורים נעליכם ברגליכם ומקלכם בידכם ואכלתם אותו בחיפזון תשחקו לאדוני ועברתי בארץ מצרים בלילה הזה והכיתי כל בכור בארץ מצרים מאדם ועד בהמה ובכל אלוהי מצרים אעשה שבטים אני אדוני והיה הדם לכם לאות על הבתים אשר אתם שם וראיתי את הדם ופסחתי עליכם, ולא יהיה בכם לגב למשחית, והכותי בארץ מצרים, והיה היום הזה לכם לזיכרון, וחגותם אותו חג לאדוני לדורותיכם, חוקת עולם תחוגוהו. 7 ימים מצות תאכלו, אך ביום הראשון תשביתו שאור מבתיכם, כי כל אוכל חמץ, ונכרתה הנפש ההיא מישראל מיום הראשון עד יום השביעי. וביום הראשון מקרא קודש, וביום השביעי מקרא קודש יהיה לכם, כל מלאכה לא יעשה בהם, אך אשר יאכל לכל נפש ולבדו יעשה לכם. ושמרתם את המצות, כי בעצם היום הזה הוצאתי את צבאותיכם מארץ מצרים, ושמרתם את היום הזה לדורותיכם חוקת עולם. בראשון ב14 יום לחודש בערב תאכלו מצות עד יום 21 לחודש בערב. 7 ימים שאור לא יימצא בבתיכם, כי כל אוכל מחמצת, ונכרתה הנפש ההיא מעדת ישראל בגר ובאזרח הארץ. כל מחמצת לא תאכלו, לכל מושבותיכם תאכלו מצות.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
המעביר והגולל בספר השני שלישי.
Shabbat Achodesh is on 1291. It's from Yechezkel. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'nviim tovim v'ratzav v'divrayhem hanemarim b'emet. Baruch atah Adonai habocher b'torah v'Moshe avdo u'v'Yisrael amo v'amed v'tzedek. כל העם הארץ יהיו אל התרומה הזאת לנשיא בישראל, ועל הנשיא יהיה העולות במנחה והנסך בחגים ובחודשים ובשבתות בכל מועדי בית ישראל. הוא יעשה חטאת בית המנחה ואת עולה ואת השלמים לחבר בעד בית ישראל. כלומר אדוני אלוהים בראשון אחד לחודש תיקח בין בקר טעמים וחיטאת את המפגש, ולקח הכהן מדם החטאת ונתן על מזוזות הבית ועל 4 בינות העזרה על המזבח ועל המזוזות שער החצר הפנימי. וכן תעשה ב7 בחודש מאיש שוגה ומפתי וכיפרתם את הבית. בראשון וב14 יום לחודש יהיה לכם הפסח חג שבועות ימים מצות יאכל, ועשה נשיא מיום ההוא בעדו ועד כל עם הארץ ברך החטאת. ושבעת ימי חג יעשה העולה לאדוני, 7 פרים ו7 אלים תמימים ליום, ו7 הימים וחטאת יריצים ליום, ומנחה איפה לפר ואיפה לאיל יעשה, ושמנין לאיפה ב75 יום לחודש בחג יעשה כאלה 7 ימים, כחטאת כעולה וכמנחה וכשמן. אמר אדוני אלוהים שער חצר הפנימית הבונה קדים יהיה סגור 6 ימי המעשה, ביום השבת ייפתח, ביום החודש ייפתח, ובנשיא דרך אולם השער מחוץ, ועמד על מזוזות השער, ועשו הכהנים את עולתו ואת שלמיו, והשתחווה על מפתן השער ויצא מהשער לא ייסגר עד הערב. והשתחוו עם הארץ פתח השער ההוא בשבתות ובחודשים לפני אדוני, והעולה שיקריב הנשיא לאדוני ביום השבת 6 כבשים תמימים ועיל תמים, ומנחה איפה לעיל ולכבשים מנחה מתחת ידו, ושמנין לאיפה. ביום החודש בר בן בקר תמימים ו6 כבשים ועיל תמים יהיו, ואיפה לבר ואיפה לעיל יעשה מנחה ולכבשים כאשר תשיג ידו, ושמנין לאיפה. ובבוא הנשיא דרך אולם אשר יבוא, ובדרכו יצא, ובבוא הארץ לבני אדוני במועדים הבא דרך שער הצפון להשתחוות, יצא דרך שער נגב והבא דרך שער נגב, יצא דרך שער צפונה, לא ישוב דרך השער שבא בו כי ניחו יצא. והנשיא בתוכם בבואם יבואו ובצאתם יצאו, וחגים ומועדים תהיה מנחה איפה לבר ואיפה לעיל ולכבשים מתחת ידו, ושמנין לאיפה. וכי יעשה הנשיא נדבה לו שלמים נדבה לאדוני, ופתח לו את השער הבונה קדים, ועשה את עולתו ואת שלמיו כאשר יעשה ביום השבת, ויצא וסגר את השער אחרי צאתו, וכבש בין שנתו תמיד תעשה לו על יום לאדוני, בבוקר תעשה אותו, ומנחה תעשה עליו בבוקר 6 איפה שמן, 6 לארוס הסולת, מנחה לאדוני חוקות עולם תמיד. יעשו את הגבס את המנחה ואת השמן בבוקר עולה תמיד. כאמר אדוני אלוהים, כי ייתן הנשיא מתנה לאיש מבניו, נחלתו היא לבניו תהיה, אחוזתם היא בנחלה, וכי ייתן מתנה מנחלתו לאחד מעבדיו, ויתה לו עד שנת הדור, בשבת לנשיא, אך נחלתו בניו להם תהיה, ולא ייקח הנשיא מנחלתם, להונותם מאחוזתו ינחיל את בניו למען אשר לא יפוצו עמי איש מאחוזתו. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם צור כל העמים צדיק בכל הדורות היה נאמן האומר ועושה המדבר ומקיים שכל דבריו אמת וצדק נאמן אתה הוא אדוני אלוהינו ונאמנים דבריך בדבר אחד מדבריך אחור לא ישוב לכאן כי אל מלך נאמן ורחמן אתה ברוך אתה אדוני היה לנאמן בכל דבריו רחם על ציון כי בית חיינו ולעלו הנפש תושיע בימינו בימינו ברוך אתה אדוני משמח ציון בבניה שמחנו אדוני אלוהינו באליהו הנביא עבדך ומלכות בית דוד משיחך במהרה יבוא ויגיע ליבנו על כיסאו לא ישב זר ולא ינחלו לחורים כבודו כי בשם קודשך נשבעת לו שלא יכפני רוע לעולם ועד ברוך אתה אדוני מגן דוד על התורה יום השבת הזה שנתת לנו אדוני אלוהינו לתושב נוכל לכבוד ולתפארת על הכל אדוני אלוהינו אנחנו מודים לך ומברכים אותך יתברך שמך בפי כל חי תמיד לעולם ועד ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת. And we return to the Siddur on page 148. יקום פורקן משמיה חן וחיסר רחמים מי שברך אבותינו אברהם יצחק ויעקב שר רבקה רחל ולאה מברך את כל הקהל הקדוש הזה עם כל קהילות הקודש הם ובניהם ובנותיהם בכל אשר להם ומי שמייחדים בתי כנסיות לתפילה ומי שבאים בתוכם להתפלל ומי שנותנים נר למאור ויין לקידוש להבדלה ופת לא רחים וצדקה לעניים וכל מי שעוסקים בצורכי ציבור בארץ ישראל באמונה הקדוש ברוך הוא ישר להם שכרם ויעשה מהם כל מחלה וירפא לכל גופם ויסלח לכל עוונם וישלח ברכה והצלחה בכל מעשה ידיהם עם כל ישראל אחיהם ונאמר Amen. We rise and turn to the inside back covers of our Siddurim to read glorious prayer for our country. Dear God, bless the United States of America and help us to preserve its cherished ideals of liberty, justice, and equality for all. We, your people, pledge to do all in our power to continue to strive to achieve our ideals, believing always that members of the human family are created equal, endowed by you with the inalienable right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. May you inspire the leaders of our great nation to govern with wisdom and courage and compassion. We ask that you, first responders, and all who keep us safe, let this land under your providence be an influence for good throughout the world, and may it fulfill the plea of your prophet that nation shall not lift up sword against nation, nor shall they learn war anymore. And let us, please, Almighty God, you who establish peace in the firmament, bring peace to all your yearning world, and let us say Amen. And a prayer for the state of Israel. We remain standing, which is back in our Siddurim on page 149. Avinu Shabashamayim, Sur Yisrael V'Golo, Barech et Medinat Yisrael, Reshit Tzmichat Gulatenu, Hagen Aleya Be'avrat Chasdecha, Ufros Aleya Surkat Shlomecha, Ushlach Orcha V'Amidcha L'Roshea, Zareya V'Yosea, V'Taknein Be'etza Tova Milfanecha, Chazek Yedidei B'Ginei Eretz Kodshenu, V'Hanchilem Eloheinu Yeshua, V'Ateret Nitzachon Te'atrein, V'Natata Shalom Ba'aretz, V'Simchat Olam Liyoshveya, V'Nomar Amen. Ashrei is page 151. Ashrei Yoshvei V'Techal Yaluchas Hashem Shabbat Hashem Shabbat. Tehillat Adonai daber ki v'yarecha basar shem kodsho le'olam va'ed va'anachnu nevarech ya me'ata v'yad olam hallelujah. Please rise. Okay, so they go back in reverse order. So that's first. This one is second. This one is third.
Do I hold it? Do I hold it?
The first one goes in last. It returns in reverse order. Yeah.
Let's do this. Is that the third? One more time. This is the third. Okay.
Yeah, that's the third.
Okay, so I say this and then we run around. Okay. Hallelujah, Shem Adonai, King is God, Shemo Levado.
Adonai lamavul Shavayeshem Adonai melech leolam Adonai ozeyam oyitain Adonai yivarech et amo shalom Choyoma. Yeah. Hey, 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 Adonai. Hey, 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 Adonai. Oh, hey, 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 Adonai. Hey, 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 Adonai. Hey, 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 yabada. Hey, 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 yabada. Hey, 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 yabada. Hey, 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 yabada. Hey, 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 yabada. Hey, hey, hey. One more time. Hey, 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 yabada. Hey, 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 bye, die, 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 hey, 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 yabada, hey, 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 yabada, hey, 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 yabada, hey, 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 yabada, hey, 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 yabada, hey, die, 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 yabada, hey, 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 yabada, hey, hey, hey. And if you felt like there was like a little bit of a there was this tune that maybe you hadn't heard that tune. But suddenly there was like this lift, and a lot of us seem to know it. The reason that is the case is because the Meshorerim, our singers, our prayers, are getting together once every couple of weeks with Jack to sing and learn some new tunes and to think about how we do this together and how we create that kind of liftoff. So please, please come consider adding your voice to that. Anything you want to add about that, Sharon? Please do that. All right. So, for like 2,000 years, almost every single rabbi who's had to like preach about Tazria Matzorah say, well, it's hard to make it relate to our day. It seems irrelevant. I'm actually not going to do that this year. I'm actually not. It's remarkable. Sometimes it's relevant. But before I even get into that, there's this other story about how it usually seems irrelevant, that it's just like, I wasn't going to it's like burning a hole on my tongue. And I just have to like share it. And like, I can hear myself. I was talking to Felissa last night, which I wasn't. I would be like, should I tell this story or not? And she's like, well, it's a good story, but why don't you save it for next year? And I'm like, that's a good idea. I'll save it for next year. But I actually like never save anything for the way back. Like if I'm ever in a situation where it's like, I got to save some food for the way back, I'm be like, that sandwich looks good right now. You know? So there's this story about Israel Meir Kagan, who's known as the Chofetz Chaim, and he wrote the Mishnah Berurah. He's a very important halachic authority in the late 19th century, and he also wrote, famously, a very massive and detailed tract about the laws of Lashon Hara, about evil speech, which is what, if you know the Midrash, the rabbis basically say all of the leprous infections, the way we're supposed to understand those is because it's the source of Motzi Shem Ra, which sounds a little bit like Mitzorah, Motzi Shem Ra. Motzi Shem Ra means to give a bad name to someone. So the rabbis basically understand all of these things are about Lashon Hara, and that's how it spreads, and it's this affliction, it's hard to identify, and it's Lashon. So there's a lot of halacha about Lashon Hara. And in this book, Israel Meir Kagan and the Chofetz Chaim, pretty much anything can count as Lashon Hara. So that's the context of the book. And as he's getting it published, as was normal, when you're getting a book published, you'd want to get haskamas. You'd want to get like imprimaturs from the fine rabbis of the day to say, yep, this is a kosher sefer, you should read it, and so on and so forth. So the Chofetz Chaim, even though he's a really big rabbi himself, he wants to get the imprimatur of his colleagues, and so he sends like his shamish around Eastern Europe to collect the signatures of prominent rabbis, and he sends them not only to the Litvak community, but also to the Hasidic community, because he wants broad appeal in the book, and he sends it to lots of different rabbis. He gets lots of different imprimaturs. And so one of the people he visits is Rabbi Chanoch of Alexander, the Shamish. He visits Rabbi Chanoch of Alexander, and he says, hey, I got this great book. It's, you want your name on this book. And he says, well, what's in it? And he says, well, it's about the laws of libel. And Chanoch of Alexander sort of looks at him curiously and strokes his beard and says, well, why would you need a book about that? And the Shamish is sort of embarrassed by his question, And he says, well, I mean, it teaches that you may not hurt your neighbor, with the tongue or with speech, and it says the laws about that. And the Rebbe of Alexander says, you don't need a book to tell you that. You don't even need speech. You can hurt someone just by saying, and he sends him away. And he doesn't give him the imprimatur. And so anyways, so the Shamash travels around, and eventually he goes back to his employer, the Chafetz Chaim, and says, so, did you get all of the signatures that I asked for? He says, well, I got all of the signatures except for one. And he says, who is that? He says, well, it's Chanukah of Alexander. And the Chafetz Chaim says, Chanukah of Alexander? And the Shamash, amazed, told him the whole tale, and at that moment, Yisrael Meir Kagan revised his book, and he put in a line that you can hurt people just as much with implied speech as you can with actual speech. So that's my Lashon Hara little story, which was it was burning a hole in my tongue. I was like, yes, I gotta tell it, and I'm glad I did. Now, I don't have anything for next year. All right, so actually I want to spend a few minutes, and really a few minutes, because we are running a little bit late, but you can't finish. I mean, we got 3 Torahs, so cut us some slack. So we're going to have a short conversation. So what the Parsha is all about is about evaluating these leprous infections. And as I said, this has seemed, I think, for the vast majority of Jewish history, quite remote. And Lori talked about this a little bit last night in her drasha as well, in talking about quarantine. But it feels to me much less remote than it once did. And I'm curious, before we look at a little bit in the Mishnah and a little bit in Rambam, I'm just curious if reading Tazria Metzora this time around, or maybe last time around, felt different substantively than it has in the past, given what we have experienced and continue to experience. So I see some heads shaking, which is good, I guess. But anyone want to share any thoughts about that? I mean, in what way it feels different?
It's always been the. Sorry, go ahead. No, I was just going to say, it seems to me it's always been about the particulars aside, about leprosy and specific kinds of impurities. It's always been about protecting the community, right? So that doesn't feel all that different. It hasn't resonated all that differently.
It hasn't resonated all that deep. You feel like the pandemic has sort of the way we've thought of. Okay, that's interesting. So we should always be concerned about those kinds of things.
Right, and I think as often is the case for me with the Torah, you have to sort of ignore some of the archaic components of it and just look at the idea that this is there to sort of impose some ideas about safety and security around disease.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that is true, though. I mean, it's the case. I'm going to try to make a little bit in the next 5 or 7 minutes, is that some of this actually feels much less archaic to me now than it did 2 years ago. But there's...
Well, the whole concept of being, you have to be removed from the community for 7 days. The word that came to my mind was archaic. Every time I read this, like that was then, but this is now. We don't do things that way now.
Right, we do 10, right. Or 5, depending on what, right? Depending on, right? So, Hildy and...
I was just going to say, it not only is protecting, that they're careful about, not just about the community's protection, but about the individual's protection, and not to make the individual feel like a pariah, because part of it, the part that struck me this year is the person going around saying impure about themselves, and that wasn't just to announce, like, stay away from me. That was also to announce, hey, I need your help. I'm in a state where I'm going to need a lot of communal support. And sometimes, like with COVID, it's been a little dicey because people aren't always as willing to maybe let people know that they're sick, because then they're worried. And we're still working on that balance, I think.
Right. Right. It's just, yeah, Andrew.
I felt in this, the way I felt in March and April of 2020, where things were going downhill, and there was really no cure at the time, or even any good treatment at
Right. All right, so let me add a little piece, and we'll keep talking a little bit. So the Mishnah, this is on side 1, where it says the priest's role in evaluating Negaim. So the Mishnah is the most ancient compilation of rabbinic law and lore, compiled from about the year, orally from about the year 0 to about the year 200 of the Common Era. Rules this way. In Mishnah Negaim. Negaim are lesions, different kinds of lesions. Everyone can become impure from Negaim, except for a non-Jew and a resident alien. So that first piece, I'm not going to focus too much on it, but the way the Torah understands Torah law is that it applies to the community. Like mixing meat and milk, for instance. That applies to kosher situations. There's no difference between eating a pork chop with melted cheese and a pork chop not with melted cheese, right? The laws, as the Torah imagined them, only obtain to people who are obligated to follow the laws. That's kind of what that's about. Okay, the second thing I want to talk about a little more. All are qualified to inspect Negaim, but only a priest may declare them unclean or clean. Why? Why?
It's a spiritual ailment, then only the spiritual leader can be the one who is allowed to declare clean or unclean.
So it's like a theurgic power that the priest has, maybe.
Well, I think sometimes the notion is that the reason you have a lesion is because you were spiritually impure. It's not a disease in the way we think of it as a disease, but it's a spiritual impurity, and therefore only a priest can remove the spiritual impurity.
Right, but remember, everyone in the room could look at a lesion on my skin and identify it, but only Bob and Larry, right, and Jonathan could declare for all of us it's impure. And what's that? Gary. And Gary, of course, and Gary could say to all of us that it is impure. Right? We could all identify it, but only they can declare it. Why? Because it's a spirit. Because maybe the declaration is a public pronouncement. Yes.
It affects the whole community. So only those who are responsible for the whole community.
And to prevent it from becoming a weapon or a threat that anybody can say you're impure.
Right. Good. Any other thoughts? Then we'll look at Rambam. Yeah.
So I guess the way I read it would be anybody can identify that and say you're sick. There's something wrong with your skin. But to make the determination that you're impure, halachically has to come from the priest. In other words, I could say you did something wrong, but only a judge could declare that what you did was illegal.
So okay, good. And I like what you said about only the priest could make the determination. According to the Mishnah, who is making the determination? And I think it's maybe not entirely clear who is allowed to make the determination. Rambam's going to make it very clear, but who do you think is making the determination in the Mishnah? Is it the priest or is it anybody? Anybody. I think so too. Right? Anyone can determine whether or not a leprous infection is impurifying or purifying, because we are all presumably, we're versed in that, or we're, at least in theory, we could be versed in that. Only the priest can make the declaration. Okay, so let's look at Rambam. So Rambam, Maimonides, sort of the giant medieval polymath, philosopher, of course, and physician, and halachist, and really among the outstanding intellects of his or any generation. In the Mishnah Torah, in Hilchot Tumat Tzara'at, the laws of defilement by leprosy, he says, okay, so the first one, anyone can become impure from Negaim, even a day-old baby or a slave, an Eved Ivri, a Jewish slave, but not an Ishal worshiper and not a resident alien. Again, that idea that the law obtains to people who are supposed to follow the law. And all are fit to examine Negaim, and all Negaim a person may examine apart from his own. Right? So which type of makes, I don't want to focus too much on it, but type of makes sense, I think, because we have a vested interest in we might not be an impartial observer to our own Negaim. Of course, you could say that also probably about your brother or your someone else that you care about. Okay. All right, so the next one is really the one I want to kind of focus on and talk about a little bit. And this is my translation, so if there's anybody out there who likes to argue, if you're the kind of person who likes to argue with translations, that's my favorite kind of person, so please do. Even though all are fit to examine Negaim, purity and impurity hangs upon the declaration of the Kohen. And you see there, the declaration there is my Sograyim, right? It doesn't exactly say that, but that's how I understand what it means. How so? If the Kohen does not know how to make an examination, an expert makes the examination, and the expert says to him, impure, then the Kohen says, impure. He says pure, and then the Kohen says pure. Isolate him, and then the Kohen isolates him. As it says, upon their words, all disagreements and lesions depend. Right? And there's a verse later in Defilement that says, yeah, the Kohen has to be the one who speaks the judgment. Sort of like Michael was saying. And even if the Kohen is a child or cognitively disabled, the expert instructs him and he decides or releases or isolates the person afflicted with the legion. Right? So even if the Kohen really has no idea what's going on, it's still you're listening to the Kohen. Right? Someone says, huh. Who said huh? Yeah? Well, you say, okay. Say more. Or the title, yeah.
It's also very respectful.
Very what?
It's in a way very respectful of the office of
It's very respectful to the office. Yes, it's very respectful to the office or the role. And we can think about it in terms of lineage, because that's how they think about it. If we're thinking about it in a slightly more contemporary context, which is I don't think too far removed, right? It's very respectful of the office and the role, and it's very important, right? It's the ceremonial aspects of the office that give it power and weight, right? You want your doctor to wear a white coat, even though doctors don't always wear white coats, but you want them to have at least attained a white coat, right? Because it's a symbol of something that points to something deep and profound about how you want to interact with your doctor, I think, right? Okay. Now look at what Rambam says. It's this is pretty wild what Rambam says. When does all of this apply? It should be when, not why. When the Kohen, that's just a typo, when the Kohen relies upon an expert. However, if the Kohen relies upon himself, it is forbidden for him to examine one lesion from among all Negaim until his teacher has instructed him and he has become an expert in all legions, along with the names of the legions that affect people, clothing, and buildings. So what is Rambam? Rambam is doing something, it's a little sleight of hand, but it's actually really, really very radical in terms of what the Torah says. What's he saying?
saying no matter what, you have to rely on the expert.
No matter what, you have to rely on the expert. Or, yeah? Follow the signs? What do you mean? Oh, follow the signs. Well, right. So that's a contemporary way of thinking about follow the signs, but it means like a Kohen. The only way a Kohen can do this himself is if he becomes a doctor first, right? If you're a doctor and a Kohen, or if you're a skin expert, elite, you're not a doctor. Doctor's a little bit anachronistic. But if you're an expert on these things and you're a Kohen, okay, then you can do it yourself if you have the degree, right? But if you don't, not only you're forbidden from doing it yourself, right? And the thing I think is so contemporary about this, also the idea of following the science is part of it, but also the question of who you listen to and who communicates, right? Like who communicates the science or whatever, or who communicates the community what they have to do, right? Not everybody, and I think this is just so strikingly relevant. Not like as a drash or as a leaf, but like actually this is like exactly, I think, what a lot of what has characterized communications around the pandemic, about knowing who to listen to and who are trustworthy voices, some of whom may be experts themselves, but some of whom are not. Some of whom might have an office of some kind that we want to respect and that we want to follow. And I think, the idea, right, it's just all of this, it's not an answer really to how we do that, but it seems so alive in these sources. Yeah.
But he doesn't really explain, maybe later in his writings, the why that you have to, to me, it's in a way undermining of the Kohen to say like, well, he doesn't know what he's talking about, but he relies on the expert, and then he turns around and says, it's kind of like, so does he explain later why he thinks we need the Kohen? Because he really relies on emphasizing the expertise, and yet still relying on the Kohen because it's in the Torah, I guess.
Well, I think he thinks that it's complicated, right? I mean, he was a physician, right? So I think that, as you are, I think he thinks that these things are complicated and that people are going to get them wrong if they're not trained. But I think, and you're right that I'm not sure if he lowers the Cohen or if he just sort of circumscribes the role, right? Like I think, and I've talked with a lot of you about this, at least if you're on the board, but a lot about sort of my own thinking about my leadership around the pandemic. I mean, I'm not obviously a doctor or an epidemiologist, but also, right, I think there's an office of the rabbi that people want to hear from, just like they want to hear from all kinds of different, the governor or whomever else. And I think that Rambam, I think that what he notices is that it's not necessarily the people that you're going to listen to who are trustworthy, right, are not necessarily the same people who are experts in every kind of situation, and that there's this public role of declaration, like the judge, as Michael mentioned, but there's also the question of sort of how the law works. Now, in the case of the judge knows how the law. Yeah, Gary.
Well, I think there's one distinction. I think it does appropriately undermine or reduce the Cohen. You're talking about a governor or a rabbi or whatever. Those are sort of earned offices. The office of the Cohen is just a status, is a birth status. It's not anything
That's interesting.
That's sort of cultivated or some kind of right of leadership in its own right. That's, so I think it's...
Right. Okay, but how about like the Queen though, right? The Queen of England, right? She I think she was a fairly talented person, but it's not an earned office, right? But there still was I don't know. I forgot what she said in 2020. She said, stiff upper lip. No, I don't think she said that. I think she said something much more gentle but there was a role for that, right? Like I think, but you're right. It's different from a judge or a doctor or a rabbi who I guess earns their office. No, that's true. And so there's more of a concern that maybe the person is just not up to it. Yeah, Barbara.
But there still needs to be a final communicator that everybody trusts and everybody believes in.
Right.
You trust them to find out the truth from their advisors.
Right, because...
But right now, the world we're in, where is that? Like, who trusts? I mean, does anybody trust elected officials? And that's what I find very difficult.
Maybe two more, yeah.
I think Rambam is tapping into the practical administration of decrees, kind of like Queen Elizabeth, constitutional monarchy. Look, she's the head of state, but she is going to follow, for the most part, what the Prime Minister is telling her. So there's practical implementation of that. Yes, the Queen of England can declare war on Russia, but no one, she's not going to do that. So she's properly siloed. And this is what they're saying. It's kind of, we have the authority of the priest relying on the experts, kind of like a constitutional monarchy.
Yeah.
Sort of.
Yeah, I think that's nice. Yeah.
I just want to say it's interesting, just a parable, is that how do we pick that doctor or that person that we trust to diagnose? It's a good reputation, right? Like we hear from other people, if I put out there who has a good dermatologist, you would all tell me, oh, go to Dr. So-and-so. And the funny thing is, this whole part is about Lashon Hara, which can ruin someone's reputation. So I think it's interesting that who do we trust, I think it's based on the reputation.
Yeah, that's interesting connection. Maybe one more thought, and then.
I was just sort of wondering, is it the declaration that then forces the person to isolate for 7 days?
Yes.
Because to me, that is potentially a different role. He gets to decide who's going to be separated from the community.
Yeah.
Than a doctor who may diagnose an illness, but doesn't have the right to say you are now going to be.
Right. It's a separation of roles, though presumably, I mean, I think Rambam assumes that the Cohen is going to do exactly what the doctor says, right? I don't think he presumes that there's a possibility of any daylight there, or anyways, there oughtn't be. But you're right, it's two separate processes.
The doctor may not have the authority
Right.
to say
Right.
he cannot interact with you.
Right. Right.
I don't know. I just think it happens all the time, not just with the governor, but in anything where you've got the person who's got the authority to say something that's binding. But if they make that determination based on a hunch, it's still binding, but it's not a good determination. But if a manager of a baseball team decides what relief pitcher to bring in just based on a hunch, that's not a good way to do it. If he bases or she bases that decision
Sabermetrics, yes.
Something, you know, but the person
I agree.
still is the one who has the authority to make the decision. It's, you know what I mean? But it should be based on.
Yeah. No, I agree. Did someone boo Sabermetrics? You did? Oh, no. What? Well, you can talk during Kiddush. All right, I want to close. Oh, about baseball. We can talk during Kiddush also. I just want to close. So, thanks for. I was struck, though, again, just by the relevance of all of this. Not as like a symbolic idea, but as actual. I mean, this seems to me to be what the Torah and what the Rambam are actually talking about, which I think is moving. And I want to close just with, so when I was a kid, I went to a conservative shul, as many of you know, and then at Hebrew high school, I went to the Reform shul in Hyde Park because the conservative shul didn't have a Hebrew high school. And I studied, I was lucky, very blessed to study with a guy named Rabbi Arnold Jacob Wolf of blessed memory, who was a really, really big figure in the Reform movement in the 60s and 70s most. He was an older man by the time I met him, but he was really, really in the Reform movement. And he was like a really, really charismatic, thoughtful guy. And he told us when I was 16 about this thing about walking down Judaism Street. And I always remembered it. And when I was in rabbinical school, I found The Condition of Jewish Belief, which was put together by Commentary Magazine in 1958. And there was the thing that he had taught me. I think he'd been saying it for almost 80 years, and I'd probably only gotten better. And so this is what he said. He said, I try to walk the road of Judaism. Embedded in that road, there are many jewels. One marked Sabbath, and one marked civil rights, and one kashrut, and one honor your parents, and one study the Torah, and one you shall be holy. There are at least 613 of them, and they are of different shapes and sizes and weights. Some are light and easy for me to pick up, and I pick them up. Some are too deeply embedded for me, so far at least, though I get a little stronger by trying to extricate the jewels as I walk the street. Some, perhaps, I shall never be able to pick up. I believe that God expects me to keep walking Judaism Street and to carry away whatever I can of its commandments. I do not believe that he expects me to lift what I cannot. Nor may I condemn my fellow Jew who may not be able to pick up even as much as I can. The various commandments look somewhat different to me. Some larger, some smaller, some important, some like linsey, woolsey, shatnez, or I would add here, like the laws of Tzarat, seem trivial. But there is no commandment that may not yet have its day, and no certainty that may not sometimes fall into doubt. I must not decide in advance what properly belongs on Judaism Street. And I may not walk down the broad parkway only, but I must follow the road even when it narrows and is no longer very easy to walk. I do not accord status to the commandments. I do not feel permitted to rate them in advance of performing them. In principle, no commandment is inferior to any other. Any orthodox insistence that every Jew must do the same thing at the same time in the same way is oblivious of human difference. Liberal subjectivism, which lets every Jew be his own God, forgets our deepest need to become what we are not yet by serving a very great master. Neither orthodox nor liberal, I try to be a Jew. And I read it for you because I can't do much better than that. I think it's a pretty perfect articulation in my mind of what it means to walk a Jewish life. And I remembered it this week, as I often do. I mean, I remember it a lot, but I remembered it in particular this week because it struck me that here was this parsha that had always seemed to me, maybe not to everyone, but it seemed to me to be somewhat remote. It's like, it's hard to read, and it's like, how many times can I talk about Lashon Hara? And it's like, it seems remote. And suddenly it seemed to be urgently speaking directly to me, and directly to us, and directly to our situation. And it was a great, I think it has wisdom, and I think it enriched my understanding of the situation. But more than that, it enriched my experience of Torah to know that, yes, right? There's gonna come a day when it does speak to me. And, may we all find those days this year and in many, many years to come. We will continue with Musaf on page 155.
Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabba V'yama d'rachirutei v'yam li'ich malchutei Yechol Beit Yisrael Ba'agala U'bizman v'imru Yehi Shmei Rabba Mevorach Yiparak v'yishtabach Yipa'ar v'yitrama v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal Shemei dekudesha Leila min kol birchata v'shirata Tushbechata v'nechemata Damiram v'yemeru. We are on page 166b for the Amidah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avoteinu Elohei Abraham Elohei Yitzchak v'Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel Elohei Leah Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor ve'Anora El Elyon Gomel Chasadim Tovim v'Konei Hakol v'Zocher Razei Avot U'Mevei Goel B'nei B'neihem L'man Shemo B'Yahava Melech Ozer U'Pokin Mashiach U'Magen Baruch atah Adonai Magen Avraham U'Poket Sarah Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai Mechayei Metim Atah Rav Lehoshia Mashiv HaRuach U'Morid HaGashem Mechapel Chaim B'Chesed Mechayei Metim B'Rachamim Sohomen Ochlim V'Rafeh Koholim Umatir Asurim Umekayem Emunato Shenei Afar Mikamocha Ba'al Geburot Umidom Elah Melech Mimi Umechayem Umatzmiach Yeshua V'ne'emat al Chayot Metim Baruch atah Adonai Mechayei HaMetim Na'aritzecha v'nakdishcha Kesod Tziyah Sarfei Kodesh Hamakdishim Shimcha B'Kodesh Hakatu Hayad Nevi'echa V'kala zel zeviyah Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh Adonai Tzvaot Al haaretz kevodo Kevodo malei olam Asher tav sholim zeh lazeh Ayei mekom kevodo li'onatam Baruch yomeru Baruch kevodo Adonai mimkomo Mimekomo Hu yifem berachamim Ve'yachona Ham yachadim shemo Erev haboker B'chol yom tamid Hamayim b'yahava Shema Omrim Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai
Ani Adonai Elohechem, Uvedivrei Kodechecha katuv lemor. Yimloch Elohim Haitzion Ador Vador, Hallelujah. Ador Vador Nagid Godlech on Netzach Netzachim Kedushat Kanakdish, Veshivchacha Eloheinu Mipinu Leomush Le'olam Va'ed, Yel Bela Kadol Kadosh Ata Baruch Ata Adonai Ha'el HaKadosh. Oseh Shalom Bimromav Huyaseh Shalom Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael V'al Kol Yoshvei Tevel V'imru Amen V'imru Amen.
Page 181.
Yikara v'kedashem me'rabah, v'alma divrachi u'tevi amlich malchutei, v'chayei chon u'v'yomei chon, u'v'chayei docho v'Yisrael, ba'agala u'yizban kari v'yimeru. Amen. Yehesh me'rabah mevorach, v'olam Yiparak v'yishtabak v'yipor v'yiramah v'yinaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yal Hashem v'tekudesha, le'ela min kol v'chata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nekamata, damiram b'yalba v'imeru. Amen. Titkabel tzilahon v'alhon, dechol Yisrael kadab v'alhon divishmaya v'imeru. Amen. Yehesh lama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Ohoseh shalom v'ramav, hu yaseh shalom. Aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'imru. Page 182. Well, this land is your land. Ein Keloheinu, Ein Kadamenu, Ein Kemalkeinu, Ein Kemoshienu, Ein Keloheinu, Michadoneinu, Michamalkeinu, Mikamoshienu. No del Eloheinu, no del Adonenu, no del Emalkeinu, no del Emoshienu, Baruch Eloheinu, Baruch Adonai, Baruch Malkeinu, Baruch Moshienu. Atahu Eloheinu, Atahu Adonenu, Atahu Malkeinu, Atahu Moshienu, Atahu Shekiru Avoteinu, Lefanecha Eketara Hasamim. Page 183. Alvenu l'shabbat l'adon ha'kol, l'tekidu al yotzer breshit, shelo asanu k'goyei harasa, v'lo samanu k'shkot ha'adama, shelo samkakinu kahem, raleinu k'chol ha'anam, v'anachnu korim, u'mishtah kavim u'motim, Lifnei melech Samayim, Yosadar, Machu, ככתוב בתורתך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, ונאמר, והיה אדוני מלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא, יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו
This week we observe the Untitled of Ann Turok, sister of Leonard Cooper, Erwin J. Weber, father of Robert Weber and father-in-law of Lori Weber, Claire Hochberg, mother of Mark Hochberg, Joan Koblenz, cousin of Eleanor Dreyfus, Gabrielle Basser, cousin of Adam Abeshouse, Robin Ilkowitz, mother of Adam Ilkowitz, David Levine, brother of Mark Levine, Shelley Ehrlich, mother of Amy Ehrlich, Henry Jaffe, father of Marshall Jaffe, Ruth Weiss, mother of Peter Weiss, and also Harry Isaac Berger and Ethel Mindus Lax, who are memorialized on our board. May their memories and the memories of all those whom you recall be blessings. Kaddish Yatom is on page 184. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei rabah, ve'alma divra kirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael, ba'gala u'v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehi shmei rabah mevorach le'olam u'lalmei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei t'kusha brichu leila min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata damiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehi shalama rabba min shemaya v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. O say shalom b'romav, hu yaseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Yasher koach to Jeremy for Musaf and to Mariut for the Torah service, and to Rabbi Dina Shargel for reading a beautiful and challenging Parsha. Tazria Mitzorah are the most challenging that any Torah reader knows, so Yasher koach. She may have left, but Yasher koach to her. Yasher koach to Jack for Hallel and for Shachar. Yasher koach to Roger for Psukim. Yasher koach to all of our Meshorim who really did elevate, I think, beautifully our services. Some of whom got here really at the crack of Psuke to Zimra and really carried us through beautifully. Thank you so much. I thought it was really, really beautiful. Yasher koach to all of you. And so I'm going to invite Dr. David Haft up to make the announcement. In a second, first I'll just say about adult ed for Pesach. There's very little interest so far in Hilchot Pesach, which is fine. It's an interesting subject. So but if there's not more interest, we will go back and just do David for the next 2 weeks because I know there's interest in that. So if you really do want Hilchot Pesach, please email Julia by Monday morning so we can make that decision. Otherwise, we'll go back to the life of David, which we're going to go back to anyways in a couple of weeks. B'vakasha.
First of all, thank you, everyone who's participated. It was really wonderful. Shabbat, shalom to everyone. It really felt tremendous energy in this room. It's wonderful to sing together, to pray together, and to be together. So, Yasher koach to all of you. And today apparently is a birthday kiddush. It's in honor of, it's sponsored by Larry and Diane Cohen, Joel and Shelley Goldberg Peck, and Robert Rossman in honor of the three boys' birthdays. All right. I only know which one's turning 65, but it looks like all three will. Okay. Well, Social Security better have a good bank account. If you would like to sponsor a kiddush, please contact Andrea, sitting over there, or the office, and we can arrange that for you too. We have a women's group today. That's at 1 o'clock after services. You've spoken about the adult education. If you're interested in the Hilchot Pesach, you got to get your request in right away. Otherwise, we're back to David, the life of David. And you can sell your chametz, and you can email that to Rabbi Resnick by Monday, the 15th of April at 8 a.m., and then you will own no chametz. Isn't that wonderful? Everyone looks forward to that. Okay, now we got more. We have resource materials for Pesach out on the table in the hallway. Take what you need. And what else we got? And then then there's a question, does anyone has any space at their Seder table? Please let us know. Who should they let know? Julia in the office. It happens. Sometimes you do have extra space. And there are people who don't have a table to come to. And then we're going to continue with the Lunch and Learn Mishnah Chug. That's on Wednesdays at noon. That's going to be by Zoom. And it's on the Mishnah. So that, for those who are not so familiar with the Mishnah, that's the oral laws that have been now taken and written down around 200, I think it's 200 CE. And we have other things. We have Project Hope, which is delivering packages to Jewish elderly Bronx residents. A package will cost $25 if you want to pay for a package, or you can help deliver them. It's going to be done on April 3rd, so this is Sunday. And Michael Dvorkin here can speak about it.
You close the announcement. There's a location in the Bronx. They give you some packages and some places to go. You deliver them to elderly, homebound Jewish people.
Can you still buy a package?
I don't know, but you don't have to buy a package. You go there, they have them all. You just deliver. It takes like maybe an hour of your time, and it's tomorrow morning.
Okay, so anyone wants to do that tomorrow, that's great. And as I said, it's in the weekly announcements. It says I should go over to a second page, but I don't see a second page. Ah, here we go. Also, we have the Midnight Run, and that's on April 9th. That's a week from this Sunday. It's going to meet at the PJC at 8 p.m. And that time you'll load your cars with blankets, clothing, personal items, and food, and you depart around 9 p.m. Anything you want to add on that?
I think we have enough people going, although if you'd like to go, that's great, the more the merrier. But we could use some more clothing donations, so if you have men's clothing to donate, just bring them by.
Is it just men?
Well, some women do, yeah. It's mostly men, especially in the winter, yeah.
Okay. We have a book group coming up. That's April 24th at 11 a.m. That's a Sunday. And the book, that's Ephraim Siegel's book, which is Juror Number 2, The Story of a Murder, The Agony of a Neighborhood. And that's going to be at the synagogue and also via Zoom. That's at 11 a.m. And also that's in the weekly announcements. Also for the planned Israel trip in 2023, there's going to be a meeting those interested in participating on April 25th at 7 p.m. here at the synagogue. And it's in the weekly announcements, but if you have questions, you can contact Adam Gerber, who's organizing the trip. And one more thing, we have a soup kitchen, thanks to Jill Goldenberg, and that's going to be on Thursday, April 28th. And volunteers are asked to provide lasagna, broccoli, and brownies. And if you need further information, contact Jill or Barry, because Barry also participates. Anybody have any other announcements they would like to make?
Just once again, women's group's going to meet here in the sanctuary. We'll just pull some chairs around after the.
Okay, that's it. Shabbat shalom, everyone. Enjoy this beautiful day.
Okay, we're going to do a little Seder preview with Many of you know Echad Miodea. Page 187. Adon Olam Asher Malach B'Terem Kol Yitzir Nivra Liet Nasa V'Chefso Kol Azay Melech Shemonik V'Yacharei Keplotako Levado Yimlok Nora V'Hu Haya V'Hu Ove V'Hu Yeh B'Tiva V'Hu Echad Ein Sheni Lehamshir Lo Lehachbira Veli Reshit, Veli Taklit, Velos, Vehamisra, Vehu Eli, Vechaigo, Suket, Libi, Yitzhak, Vehu Nisive, Manosim, Menachim, Sibi, Omekavi, Yado, Avkidru, Kivi, Eti, Shavia, Yemeruchi, Higevi, Ahati, Adonai, Li, Velo, Shabbat Shalom.
I like the American. I like the yeah.